Toastmasters just offers several different position roles, mine being one of them, and all the roles are on the board, but they just offer varying types of speeches and opportunities for us to communicate and then also get feedback from that communication. I'm going to call up all the different roles and have them explain their functions during this meeting, and afterwards then I'll kind of take a survey of the audience and see if we can introduce some of the new faces that I see. So to start off, I'll have Sarah come up and explain her role.
So my role today is the grammarian. So I provide the word of the day, which today is, I knew I was going to say it wrong, antiquated. It's an adjective. It means very old, aged, too old to be fashionable, suitable, or usable. And in a sentence, the committee thought the marketing strategy was too antiquated to approve. And I also looking at, as the speakers go through their speeches, looking through speech connectors such as and then any colorful language they use.
Next up, we have Chris, and I'll have him come down and explain his role, and also thank you again for filling in.
Thank you. Welcome, fellow Toastmasters and guests, and we have a brand new guest here today, so welcome. Thank you for stopping by. I am filling the role of the timer, and I will be helping Tom to keep our meeting on track so we don't get too verbose and go over our time. I have a very new timing light that has recently replaced our antiquated light that broke last year. So with that being said, we have a good roster of speakers, and I will help them keep on time by giving them signals when they have reached their time limits. Most speakers have 5 to 7 minutes, and when they have reached the beginning of their allotted time frame, I will turn on the green light and wave a green flag. And when they have reached the halfway point of their requested time slot, I will wave a yellow flag and turn on the yellow light. And when they have reached the limit of their requested time frame, they get a red light and a red flag. And if we go over too much, there will also be an audible buzzer alert. We're usually not too generous with that tool when we're speaking. Next up, while our evaluators are finishing up their forms, we like to have table topics, which puts people on the spot and gives them a chance to practice their minds and practice their on-the-spot speeches. And for those speeches, there is a 1 to 2 minute time frame for that. And when they reach their 1 minute mark, they've made the minimum and they get a green light and a flag. 90 seconds, they get yellow, and when they have reached 2 minutes, they get a red. And when our evaluators themselves come up to give their interpretations of the speeches, they each get 2 to 3 minutes to give their evaluations. And when they reach 2 minutes, green, 2.5, yellow, and when they have reached 3 minutes, they get the red. So.
With that, I'm just going to ask the visitors and guests if they can just stand up or stay sitting and introduce themselves and tell us how they found out about our club and what got them interested. And then we'll move on to our speeches and let you go from there. So with that.
My name is Lori Steinke. I'm an education coordinator in the Continuous Professional Development Department, and I found your club on the intranet. I'm just looking for ways to get some more experience doing presentations and thinking on my feet a little quicker, so.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Sivam Puru. I attended the Toastmasters Club a few times in the past. I haven't been active for the last few weeks, and I think I'll be more active going on.
Thank you.
My name is Abdi Mahmoud, and I am the statistical programmer analyst. And I work with the FSR, the Health Science Research area, and when it comes to Toastmasters, I searched around and I saw few of them in the Mayo family kind of. And this is through the internet actually, and this is the one that I thought maybe it might be the best time that I can hold with, which is close to my lunchtime kind of. So I hope I will be active and will connect with you guys.
Sam Marsland, I've been coming a few times. Not too much of a visitor yet, but met through town.
Well, thank you, guests. I appreciate all of you from coming, and I hope that you join our club and get stuff out of this. It's been very beneficial to me. I've improved my public speaking. I find I feel like I still try to improve on a daily basis. So, with that, I'm going to introduce our speakers, and for the time limit for this first speech, it is 46 minutes. And our first speaker is our area district governor. And as many of you will see, she's very animated, she's very pleasant, and she's very well spoken. She is doing a speech called The Ant and the Dove. It's from the Storytelling Advanced Communicator Manual. And with that, I'll welcome up Tanya.
Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and most welcome guests. I'm going to eyeball all of them. There's a lot today. The ant and the dove, what could that possibly mean? Well, it comes from an old Aesop's fable. And though many people may think that Aesop's fables are antiquated, I'm going to try to bring it into currency with modern day twist. For those of you who don't remember, The Ant and the Dove is a story where a little tiny ant went to the river to quench his thirst. But he fell in and was being swept rapidly down the current. And a dove was sitting in the tree above the river, looked down and saw that the ant was about to drown. So she looked around about her and she snipped off a leaf and dropped it into the river. The ant was able to climb onto the leaf and float to shore and be saved. And right about the time that the ant got off the leaf and was drying off, he saw a bird hunter approaching underneath the tree of where the dove was standing, where the dove was seated. And the bird hunter was taking some lime twigs out of his satchel and was going to coax the dove down just so he could catch it. And at that moment, the ant perceived what the hunter was doing, so bit his foot, and the hunter got just so distracted from the pain, he ran off and the dove flew away. That was one of Aesop's fables. My story is personal. It's about me. When I was in 9th grade, I was walking between the lunchroom and the gym in between lunch hours, so it's kind of an open forum. And all of a sudden, I was grabbed and thrown up against a wall of lockers and grabbed, like this, by another girl from my school. And she wasn't a very nice girl, but I had never argued with her. We had never had a discussion. I had no idea that a fight was going to happen. I'm kind of a happy person, if you don't know me, and I kind of laugh a lot. I kind of talk a lot. I'm kind of loud. Maybe that's annoying. So anyway, I was going across this this area, and she pulled me up like that. And I think I was even like almost, I had to be on my tippy toes. And all of a sudden, filed around her a half moon of her friends. Some of whom I thought were my friends in 8th grade, but no longer in 9th grade. Anyway, and they were cheering her on, like, I don't know exactly what they were saying, kind of like the villagers with the torches, you know. And so she's holding me up, and she's saying something like, I'm gonna kick your patootie. And I was like, and I was holding her back because, well, I came from a family where I had brothers, and so you wrestled, so I wasn't certainly gonna let somebody grab my shirt if I wasn't gonna grab their shirt back. So maybe she didn't know this because I'm a happy person, but I grabbed her shirt back, and I don't know what I was doing, but I think I was going, back, just to like try to get her out of my, you know, face. And then, all of a sudden, there was like, 2 people from my grade that were kind of friends burst through the half circle, and they jumped forward, and Holly came up, and Kim, they came up and they said, you get your hands off her, or we'll stick our brothers on you. And the whole thing dispersed. She let go of me and just stomped away like that. And they came up and they said, are you okay, are you okay? And I was like, oh yeah, I'm fine. I think I was sweating and, you know, needed to go to the bathroom, but that was really nice of you, because they weren't really my best friends, or they weren't the people I talked to on the phone at night or anything like that. Just some nice girls. They played sports, and the other girls didn't play sports. They were the kind that sat in the car in the parking lot smoking the cigarettes, and I wasn't one of those. I guess I was more like the other kind. So anyway, that was a big relief, and for the rest of my high school career, that bully would sometimes turn on the corner and go, but never bothered me anymore. So then, when we graduated from high school, I got a job at a Piper Jaffray in Hopwood, a firm where you invest your money. A firm where you invest your money. Stockbroker firm, yes. Because my family had a friend and they got me the job, and it was a nice paying job, $4.50 an hour. I was raking in the dough. And I had plans to go to college, and I was all set. And this friend, Holly, she had become my best friend. And she didn't have a good job, and she wasn't planning to go into college. In fact, her parents told her, her mother told her, just find a nice husband. This was in 1981, not the 50s, okay? And so I told her, no, you need to go to college. But she didn't have any money. Well, one day at my new job, the husband of my current boss called and said, you're so awesome, Tanya, I want to hire you away from my wife. I'll pay you $6 an hour. So it was like a $2, well, maybe it was a lot more than I was making anyway. And I should have just said yes. And I went, no, I can't do that, but I have someone who could do the exact same job who's just as good as me, and you'll love her. And long story short, he hired Holly, and she had raised enough money that she could go to college in the fall. And the moral of the story is, with the same moral as the ant and the dove, one good turn deserves another.
I'll ask Chris for 1 minute and allow evaluations to be written down. Our second speaker is doing a project out of the Council Community Care Manual. And his speech is, failure is not the pillar of success. He's asking for 5 to 7 minutes. Please welcome Diganta. And as I see it, looks like your arm brace has taken off.
Toastmasters, fellow Toastmasters, and guests. This morning, I just came back from India yesterday, and I'm still going through my jet lag. And this morning I opened my email and I found that I have to speak. So here's my speech. The topic of my speech is failure is not the pillar of success. And I say that because everyone fails. Everyone has a lot of failures. So if failure is the pillar of success, we all would be successful people. But not everyone is successful. I'll give you some examples, like Michael Jordan lost almost 300 games. That's more than average NBA player has court time in. Missed over 9,000 shots. That's more than average NBA players even take. 26 times he was given the ball to make the winning shot and he missed. When he was in high school, he didn't make the varsity team because he was short. He came back home and he wept. His mom came to him and said, "Son, the best thing you can do from now is to prove your coaches that they made a mistake." And he stopped weeping. And he made a resolve to make it to the varsity team. He increased his intensity of practice. His sports instructor, Ruby Sutton, saw that change in him. And he said, "I usually go to the school between 7 and 7:30 a.m. and whenever I open the door, I see Michael Jordan bouncing the ball. In fall, in winter, in summer, no matter which season, he's always there." And he had to ask him to leave the court many times because it was time for some other folks to practice. He has so much intensity while doing practices or games that his fellow teammates had to increase their level of game just to keep up with him. And the next year he grew 10 inches and the coaches couldn't stop him anymore and he made the varsity team. Abraham Lincoln, in 1816 his family was forced out of their home. He had to work to support them. 1818 his mother died. 1831 he failed in business. 1832 ran for state legislature, lost. 1832 also lost his job, wanted to go to law school but couldn't get in. 1833 borrowed money to do business, which he failed, and it took him 17 years to pay back that loan. 1834 ran for state legislature again, this time he won. 1835 was engaged to be married. Sweetheart died and his heart was broken. 1836 had a total nervous breakdown and was in bed for 6 months. 1838 sought to become Speaker of the state legislature, defeated. 1840 sought to become elector, defeated. 1843 ran for Congress, lost. 1846 ran for Congress again, this time he won, went to Washington and did a good job. 1848 ran for re-election to the Congress, lost. 1849 sought the job of land officer in his home state, rejected. 1854 ran for Senate of the United States, lost. 1856 sought the vice presidential nomination at his party's national convention, get less than 100 votes. 1858 ran for US Senate again, he lost again. 1860 elected President of the United States. Abraham Lincoln was responsible to abolish slavery. That's the biggest gift to mankind in the modern times. Thomas Edison. I'll come back to Thomas later. And I would like to quote my personal experience during this past vacation. I had to make a trip to India. And in India, the roads are narrow. And I think half of the size of US roads. And 10 times more vehicles on the road. if you can think of a jar where you have bigger stones and then smaller stones. The bigger stones are like bigger vehicles and smaller stones are smaller vehicles. You see some rooms there, some air there. In India, when you're on the road is full of the bigger stones and smaller stones. And then when you see some gap, the bikes fill in. So if you think of the jar with small stones and big stones and you pour sand, that's how the traffic is in India. And I couldn't even imagine me driving on those roads. But I said to myself that somewhere I have to start. And my sister got a car from her friend, and she also mentioned my friend's story that she learned driving and she was driving in 1 month. And that hurt my ego. I'm like, if she can drive on those roads after learning within a month, I can definitely do it. And I took the charge. I started driving a stick shift. Never driven stick shift. And I hit other people on the road, driving slow. I hit other vehicles, the smaller ones. So my sister and Wom, they wouldn't ride with me the first week, but the second week was much better. And by the time I was about to leave India, I was a very good driver, even though I was ticketed once for not having a seat belt. Nobody wears seat belt in India, just to let you know. But I did after I got the ticket. And I was very happy for that accomplishment. And I failed before, but then I took the charge and I decided to take some risk and try one more time, and this time I succeeded. So the conclusion of my speech is, I'll conclude with Thomas Edison's quote that when he was inventing light bulb, he failed 1,000 times. But the way he quotes is this way. He says, I didn't fail 1,000 times. It took me 1,000 steps to invent the light bulb.
A lot of failures. I'm kind of imagining those roads in India, like the Mayo parking lot. It's gonna be a long ways. I'll ask for 1 minute again for evaluation, please.
Okay.
Don't hesitate to interrupt. It's okay.
Our third speaker is Joe Sharp. As many of you know, Joe's a very fluent speaker and also a very extemporaneous speaker in his speeches. His title is Difficult People Don't Mean It. He is asking for 8 to 10 minutes. 5 to 7 minutes. We're extemporaneous here. And he is rehearsing the speech for an international speech. Please welcome Joe.
Well, hello. I want to talk about difficult people. And the person who taught me the most about it is pretty well known to most of you, Steve Jobs. I'd like to say that on one hand, Steve Jobs had a lot of gifts that one could love. And on the other hand, he was so rude you could hate him. And so what I had to learn is that there's a middle ground, and that's what I'm going to talk about. In 1977, I moved to Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is the part of California where the PC was developed, where Apple, among other people, developed the computer, and Intel, the chip. The first thing that happened to attract me was the West Coast Computer Fair, the first West Coast Computer Fair. This was a collection of the oddest, youngest people you've ever seen in your life, trying to convince you that they had built the world's greatest computer. The place was just littered with PC boards and wires, and it was a mess. But there was one computer that just stood out, the Apple II, because it was the second computer, and most of you know that Steve Jobs had a real flair for attractiveness. Have any of you seen an Apple II? My goodness, this is fantastic. Well, I went over to Steve and said, you know, you have a beautiful computer here, but what are you going to do about the competition? What competition? There's 13 other computers being shown here. He says, these aren't my competition. My competition is IBM and the Japanese, neither of whom were in the PC field at the time. I was so frustrated I turned my back on him and walked away. It's just that he was about 5 years ahead of me. It took me a little while to appreciate that. So I went back and I said, Steve, you do have a nice machine. Have you got a manual for it yet? Now you have to realize that this was a group of 20-year-olds and I was an antiquated 37-year-old. I was a professor of computer science. And he said, no, we don't have a manual yet. I said, I'll tell you what, Steve, I'll write up a draft of a manual for you if you'd like. Okay, he said, show it to me in a month and I'll look at it. Well, I don't know how many of you have ever tried to write a book in a month, but I'll tell you, it took a lot of work. In fact, I lost a lot of sleep, in addition to my regular job. So I produced a machine. I had been teaching the elementary PC, so I knew what a book had to do. And I produced a draft, complete with oh yes, he loaned me an Apple II, by the way. And I ran the programs on his machine and had a whole nice illustration. And I gave him the draft. He says, I'll think about it. I'll see you tomorrow. So the next day I went to see him and he took my draft and he walked over to the garbage can and threw it in the basket and said, this is just shit. Well, I'll tell you what happened next. I walked away. I was determined to never see Steve Jobs again. But about 2 weeks later, he called me and said, you know, there's some interesting things happening at Apple. Why don't you come over and take a look? I said, I'll think about it. But in the meantime, a friend of mine is a psychotherapist. And I said, this guy's just a cruel beast. She said, you just don't understand him. She said, I have a lot of patients like him. They're so selfish, they don't even know they're being mean. He wasn't trying to be mean, he couldn't help himself. And he didn't know what he was doing. I said, well, he did call me. And I guess it didn't look like he was enjoying himself. I'm going to have to think about that. I think maybe you've told me something interesting about dealing with difficult people that I hadn't realized. So the answer is that I had a chance to think about it, and I decided that I couldn't hate him. I mean, I couldn't love him, and I couldn't hate him, but at least I could understand it. And I think that was a big insight to me about how to deal with difficult people. They don't mean to be mean. They just can't help it.
Can I have 1 minute for evaluation, please? Before we go on to the topic master, Chris had an announcement that he would like to express and share with everybody. So I'll welcome Chris back down.
Thank you, Toastmaster. How many of you, when curious about something, ask somebody in an organization information about their organization, and they tell you an email address, and you can remember it just like that? No hands? We got a deal for you. This is for guests and members to help invite other visitors to our High Nooners meetings. They are invitation cards. You don't have to give them an email, you don't have to give them a web address. That is all right here on the card. We have plenty before everyone leaves. I would love it if everybody takes a handful of 5 of these cards. I think there's only 2 handfuls back there. But anyway, nice antiquated tool to use in this wonderful modern world that is I guess you call it an analog reminder. So I just want to let everyone know in our High Nooners Club that we have these wonderful reminders and invitation tool to come and visit our club. Thank you.
I'm glad you specified 5 because I have 26 fellow classmates next week, and I'm constantly asked about what Toastmasters is. So I'm going to grab 26.
I can give you mine.
That's okay. I'll grab a handful and bring them to the class. I just have one more announcement. Amy wanted me to remind all the Toastmasters that there's an area contest for our district in Winona this Friday. It's at the Area Chamber of Commerce, and it's from 6:30 to 9. So if anybody is able to go, and I think a couple of people have tried to arrange carpool sports. With that, we'll proceed on, and I'm going to ask Deanna to come up, and she'll explain her role as a topic master and allow us to have some extemporaneous speeches.
It appears that everybody today has a role aside from our guests, and I would welcome guests to extemporaneously speak if you wish, but I'm not going to pick on you. I will ask for hands, volunteers today, since everybody has a role. The first question I have, I really particularly like this movie. One of the world's most recognizable movie songs is Somewhere Over the Rainbow from The Wizard of Oz. What do you think is on the other side of the rainbow? Volunteers? Come on, John. You have an answer to that one, don't you?
Okay.
Do you want me to repeat it?
No,
Okay.
no.
Question and topic is Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And just so you don't make me sing it, because everybody would leave if I started singing. My first thought is, and I know we're not supposed to really talk about religious stuff, so it's up to talk briefly about that and go on to something else. But I'm a Christian, and so look forward to eternity in heaven and at my death. And so I think the first thing that came to me was at the end of the rainbow, or what's at the end of life, what is there? But then I'm going to go on and talk about one of my all-time favorite movies. So I know I can change it. Is Man from Snowy River. I love that movie. I've seen it probably 20 times. And the music, what brought me to mind is, the music is, I hear a few notes of it, I know what's going. And if I need to calm down, if I need to get some sleep, I'll put that music on and kind of just drift off and go, yeah. Because I love the mountain scenery, I love the adventure. And, you know, the guy getting the girl at the end, that's kind of adds a little topping on to it. But Snowy River. Thank you.
Thank you. The piece about our table topics as part of our weekly meetings is that it helps people who may not be comfortable speaking off the top of their head, off the cuff as they say, or if you were in a job interview or your boss asked you a question and you're on the spot, it helps you prepare for those situations and makes you more comfortable speaking without preparation, if you will. The next question has to do with careers, but I'll frame it up in a different way. I think there's a TV show, or there used to be a TV show, Dirtiest Jobs, or something like that. So the question is, what would you least like to do for a career? Any volunteers?
I'll take that
John,
one.
I'd love to have you take that one.
Okay. My wife will laugh at this one because she has a list of jobs that I'm saying I would never do that job. You know, I've done the busting the tables. I've cleaned out the horse barns in the spring. I've had all kinds of interesting jobs. When the busting the tables, they put the beer bottles down this tube and a rack that went and stacked all the beer bottles. So they sat there for a week with cigarettes and everything else. The first job of the night was to take all those beer bottles out of this rack thing and put them into the boxes. You talk about the stale beer in the hot room for a week and cigarettes mixed in. Oh, yeah, that's a terrible, terrible job. Another terrible job that I've told my wife that I would never want to do is a garbage man in July. Can you imagine driving around with that truck all day and going, whoa, yeah, that's really good smelling stuff. I'm just trying to think of some of the other jobs that I would not want. I would not want to run a daycare and childcare and change all those dirty diapers and screaming little kids. No. My kids were enough. I mean, you know, somebody else's kids' ear, their dirty diaper's dirty. Go take care of it. But, you know what? I'm very thankful for all those people that do those dirty, squishy jobs that I would never want to do. Thank you.
That's enough for today. Thank you.
Isn't that what the diaper genie's for? You just rub the little lamp and it comes out and knows that for you?
You don't have kids yet.
That would be an antiquated diaper genie.
Give it away. All right, now we come to the kind of one of the most important part of Toastmasters. Hear from other people and kind of improve on their speeches based upon how the speeches were received. And with that, I'm going to ask Jenny to come up. She'll be the general evaluator for this portion, and she can explain her role and introduce the following people.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. My role as the general evaluator, this is kind of where we turn the meeting just a little bit. We've had our great speeches, and now we have the opportunity to evaluate our speakers and share some of the things that they did very well and the opportunities for improvement or enhancing their speeches as well. So my role is to introduce each one of our evaluators, and I'll also ask our grammarian and our timer to come up and give the grammarian and timer reports at the very end. So to begin, I am going to introduce John, who will be evaluating timer. So welcome to John.
Thank you. Fellow Toastmasters, guests, and especially Tanya. I love this speech. I love your seriousness. I am so serious, just like you are. No, I love your fun speeches. Love listening to them. And the ant and the dove, you told us exactly enough to understand and remember the story, because I don't remember Aesop's fables. I know I remember what they are, but each one, no. but you didn't give us too much detail. I love when you use the phrase right about that time. There's some pauses in there, some vocal variations. It was a very good phrase. And I like the humor involved when you describe yourself. You like to laugh, you like to talk, and all those descriptions. And then the transition in talking about with your friend was a very smooth transition. It made sense. I wasn't wondering, well, where's she going from here to here? In the evaluation guide, the first question was about how was a story presented simply and clear, and I answered that and would say yes. Did she hold our interest? I said very well. And when she started describing the fight and grabbing her by the collar and throwing her up in the locker, I could picture that. And the little U shape forming. And then with the brothers, I could see her grabbing back and, oh, is she going to call up and punch another girl, or what's going to happen? You know, because it made me listen. And all the story, all the elements were there. You explained the fable to the story and to the end of Holly getting the job. And I like that twist too. Where did that came back around? The one thing that I would maybe do different is expand more on that friendship with Holly, or what you did, or what happened with that. But overall, I love the speech. I love your sense of humor and love your stories. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next up, I will invite Bev, who will be evaluating Tim.
Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and especially Gigante. This was his second speech, so he's just getting going on things. It was talking about organization, and so we're looking at things associated with organization. I think he did very well with, as one of the things that they talk about is listing 3 different things that you're going to kind of talk about, and then breaking that down into sub topics, and then kind of talking about those areas. And so he did that when he talked about Michael Jordan, Abe Lincoln, and then he went to himself, and then came back with the conclusion with Thomas Edison, where he could have kind of done the same thing as well, but did well with that. I think it was very interesting to the group because it was all people that we knew, and then to bring it into yourself as that third person was very good. I think myself, at the very beginning, could have been a little bit more dynamic, kind of getting us into it, because you told your title and then you kind of started right into Michael Jordan. So I think a little bit more in kind of getting us prepared for that you're going to go through the whole a little bit more there. I think one of the things that they look for is preparation and research. And he had lots of dates and things, so that validated all the information that he had, so that was good, showed the research part of it. I think the one thing in the content, when you had Abe, you had so much information that we're kind of like going on and on and on. So maybe even if it's something like that, maybe to have it up, like a timeline up on the board or something, and then just to talk about maybe 3 of those times. But you really showed how he should have quit a long time ago, because he had lots of failures there. And I think when you talked about your traffic, I think that was wonderful when you talk about the stones, and you can just see big stones and then roller stones and then sand as they get smaller, how they all fill in to make, I'm sure, this road completely blocked up. So that was very good to visualize there. I think as far as the delivery, you seemed very comfortable up here. You had your notes, but when it came to the dates, you read a few of those, just because there were so many dates type thing. But I think you looked very comfortable as you were here. Could have moved around a little bit more, possibly. And I think a little more practice. As you
you know, that it was just lucky that you got it in here this morning. Good speed, you had nice pauses and things, good humor, it just really flowed very well. And I love the quote at the end, that just kind of tied the whole thing up, as all of them are failing, that it isn't seen as a failure, it's just practicing it more and getting there. Otherwise, I think it was very good.
And for our last evaluation, Deanna will be evaluating Joel. I'll invite Deanna to come back.
Madam General Toastmaster, General Evaluator, Toastmasters, and most welcome guests, and especially Joe. Joe is one of our more accomplished speakers, and it's difficult to provide an evaluation on somebody that has such a unique gift for storytelling. I really enjoyed the fact that, first of all, I have to say, wow, you knew Steve Jobs. You had one of his original computers. Do you still have it? I thought you It was fascinating to hear this personal story about somebody who has become one of the great icons in our world. Very interesting, and you had us right away when you started talking about Steve Jobs and really putting context. We've heard about what a difficult person he is, but you really gave us some good examples of it, especially when you went over to the trash can and threw in the manuscript that you had spent all that time working on. So that was well done. As I said, you have a gift for it. I think there are some opportunities where you can improve, and one of the things that it's hard for me to articulate it because you did have a good opening and you had a good conclusion. I think if I were going to give you any suggestions at all, it would be tell us what the point of your story is going to be. And I think I might be making a leap here, but you had mentioned earlier that your speeches are always about an insight that you have or that you want other people to have. So perhaps you could open with, today I'm going to share a story that will provide some insight for you on how to deal with difficult people. And this started back in 1987, back in Silicon Valley when I was, working in the industry. So I think if you could just clarify that piece a little bit, you'll have a really solid opening, and the rest of the story just flowed so naturally, very well prepared. I can't think of anything else that I would suggest for you.
And I will invite Sarah up to give us the Grammarian report. So we'll welcome Sarah back up.
Everyone did really good. Tanya, looks like she's gone, had a few so's. Deganta, you had a so and a ah. Joe, I liked your cruel beast. That was really good language. For John, he did have some so's and ums, but I didn't notice any in his evaluation, more of the table topics. Beverly, there was a few so's and an and Deanna, I didn't notice anything.
And next, we'll invite Chris will do the timer's report from Maverick. So we'll turn around and hear from Chris.
Thank you, Madam General Evaluator. Tanya had requested 4 to 6 minutes, and her speech was 5 minutes 47 seconds. Deganta had requested 5 to 7 minutes, and his speech was 7 minutes and 47 seconds. Joe had requested 5 to 7, and his speech was 5 minutes and 16 seconds. John, for the first time, he spoke for 1:33 during the table topics, and for his second speech, he added a second with 1:34. And going right down the line, third time John was up front. He was giving an evaluation for Tanya, and his evaluation lasted 2 minutes and 27 seconds. Bev's evaluation was 3 minutes and 5 seconds, and Deanna's evaluation was 2 minutes and 15 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. And to wrap things up, I have just a couple of general comments. very busy, and there's many days, on the days that I don't particularly have a role, that I think, oh, I don't know if I should go to Toastmasters today. I have a million other things to do. I'm always so happy that I come to Toastmasters. I learned something from all of the speeches, whether it's the message, the topic, or just some speaking tips, and also hear from our evaluators, and that really helps each of us feel and learn some things regarding speeches as well. A couple of general comments about the meeting. The meeting started a couple minutes late, but we had people who were graciously filling roles throughout the last week, but then at the last minute too, so thank you to everyone who served in a role today. Tom, your first time as Toastmaster, you mentioned. Great job, great use of humor, particularly comparing the roads in India to the Mayo Clinic parking ramp, and your knowledge of the diaper genie. If I could make any improvements, and these aren't particularly directed at this meeting, but just in general, just a reminder, and we can share this at our meetings, but a reminder to all that along with our Competent Communicator Manual, we also have leadership manuals. And so everyone has a leadership manual. If you serve in a role such as Toastmaster or General Evaluator, bring that leadership manual and have someone fill out an evaluation of you doing that role. There's a number of things to be filled out in there, but once you have that completed, you have that leadership manual completed. Another thing I want to mention, and I feel like I'm targeting the wrong people because every one of you is here, but remember, we have our April schedule out, and so everyone is scheduled for roles each month, each week I should say, and so if you're scheduled for a role, you are asked to be at the meeting. That being said, if you can't make your role, you are asked to find a replacement. So just a friendly reminder to all of you who are here and those who couldn't be here as well too. But overall, great meeting. Tanya's storytelling speech, Diganta, your calmness with just learning that you're doing the speech this morning was amazing. And Joe, to hear about you meeting a famous business icon was just awesome. To hear about our evaluators were great. Overall, wonderful meeting. So I'll turn it back over to Tom to close it up for us.
Just to reiterate it again, thank you everybody for filling roles. I know it's kind of a little scramble, especially at the end. Yes, thank you for coming. I hope you come back in the future. And then I'll close the meeting.
Thank you. See you later.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.